Hey, my name's Sean. I'm an Enneagram teacher and a psychotherapist, and today we're talking all about Type 7 on the Enneagram. Type 7 goes by a couple of different names, are often called the Enthusiast, the Adventurer, or the Epicure. And Type 7s are cheerful, optimistic people who want to get the most out of life, and they're really good at synthesizing ideas. But Type 7s can get into trouble sometimes because they have a lot of avoidance of pain and discomfort. And so this can make it very difficult for them to face up to problems in their personal life and in their relationships. And when it comes to actually following through with the ideas they have and all the planning that they put into place, Type 7s can easily get distracted and procrastinate a lot, which means that they often have a difficult time actually finishing projects. So beginning with the origins of this type, the basic unconscious belief for Type 7 is that the world frustrates me, limits me, and causes me pain. Now, it's actually quite difficult to get a strong sense of what many 7s experienced in their childhood because, as we can see from that basic belief, 7s are averse to kind of limitations and pain and discomfort. And so when they experience these things, they want to move away from them more towards pleasurable, fun, exciting things. And so when it comes to talking about their childhood, we're looking for a balanced report of both the good and the bad, but many 7s will neglect to talk about the bad things that happen, or at least downplay them significantly. But what we can learn from 7s who have done work on themselves and are able to talk about these things more comfortably is that many 7s experience a childhood home where they just felt generally afraid. And this doesn't necessarily have to have been a malicious environment where they were being harmed, but just an environment where they felt like they wanted to kind of retreat into something that was more pleasurable and fun and exciting, and away from things that were scary to them. At the same time, sometimes 7s talk about having a very authoritarian parent. This doesn't necessarily have to be the father, it can be the mother as well. But just the parent or caretaker who had a lot of rules and limits and restrictions on what they can and can't do. And so 7s naturally rebel against these things because their impulse, their temperament is to seek out pleasure and explore and try new and interesting things. And so this is why we now see in adult 7s that many of them are very good at kind of skirting away from authority. And when they're confronted with rules or limitations from authority figures, they're actually quite charming and able to kind of charm people into relaxing the rules or just letting them off completely as a response to this earlier environment of having to cope or confront this authoritarian parent. Type 7s can be found in the head center of the Enneagram, where the core emotion is anxiety. Now, compared to types 5 and 6, type 7s really underplay their anxiety, in the sense for the everyday person who's encountering 7s, they really might not get a strong sense that type 7s are anxious or indeed that they're afraid. They seem to have a lot of energy, but it's more of a positive, upbeat bubbliness to 7s rather than kind of a anxious, scared feeling for 7s. What the trained observer will start to realize, however, though, is that a lot of what 7s are doing is responding to their anxiety, in the sense that type 7s will feel pain and discomfort, as we all do, but particularly feel heightened anxiety. And the response to this is to retreat into their mind. And so this will then manifest itself in mental activity of a sort of looking to the future and planning new fun, exciting things, or trying to kind of blend ideas together as a way to escape anything that's happening in the moment that might be limiting or problematic for them, especially if those feelings are anxiety or fear. The passion for type 7 is called gluttony. Now, when we use the word glutton in our modern day language, we're more referring to someone who has an excessive greed for food. Someone like a Homer Simpson character who just eats donuts by the dozen, for example. But in the context of the Enneagram, we're more talking about someone who has an insatiable hunger for pleasurable or satisfying experiences of all kinds. So while this can mean good meals, it can also mean interesting conversations with people, good music to listen to, fun places to go or things to see. And so we're talking about a wide variety of experiences, and the important word here being variety. Type 7s might find something narrow and very niche that's interesting, but recognize in this something that is narrow and niche, it's quite limited. And so type 7s are operating on their core belief where they feel that the world is limiting. So their response to this is to seek variety in many different ways. Now, you might actually ask yourself, what's the problem with this? Why would it be bad for you to be looking for pleasurable, enjoyable things? And what could go wrong with having a little bit of variety in life? The problem with gluttony, however, for 7s is that it ends up becoming a hamster wheel, because the key thing about this is that it is an insatiable hunger. There's not a sense of satisfaction in this. We have to acknowledge that in life, in all situations, there are going to be problems and limitations. Very rarely do things go exactly as planned. So if we imagine a type 7 is kind of working a dreary job that they hate, and so they're planning this adventure, this fun holiday they're going to go on. And then they get to go on that holiday, but things aren't exactly just as fun as they'd imagined them to be. All this time they'd spent planning and they're actually there, they're not as great, and there's a kind of problems, and maybe it's a bit colder than they thought, and the people aren't as friendly as they thought that they would be. So they're experiencing problems in the moment, discomfort and pain. And so the response to that then is to retreat into the head and start planning and thinking about more. And so gluttony for 7s is very much a present moment thing, in the sense wanting variety in the moment, not talking to one person at the party, but talking to everyone at the party. But it's also a mental activity as well, in the sense a retreat into the mind and escape from what might be happening in the present moment into something that is more exciting, interesting, pleasurable to think about, or that will be happening in the future, as an escape from the uncomfortableness of the moment. The defense mechanism for type 7 is called rationalisation. Now, this is the process of justifying, explaining, or reframing one's thoughts, feelings, or behaviours as a means of avoiding or obscuring one's true intentions or the effects of their behaviour. Now, there's a lot there, so let's unpack that a little bit. What does rationalisation look like for 7s, and how does it protect them? We've talked about how type 7s are trying to avoid limitations and pain and frustration. Now, the unfortunate reality is that these are all parts of life. There's not really much you can do in life that's not going to avoid some kind of discomfort or pain or limitation. So what type 7s will do when they encounter this is instead just flip things around, try to reframe things or at least justify things to make it not seem as bad as it really is. So they might have gone through a really difficult breakup, but they'll say, oh, well, actually I learned a lot of good lessons in that relationship, making it seem not as bad as it actually was. Or they might justify having a chocolate bar at night by saying, oh, well, I'm going to go for a run tomorrow and work it off, even if they might not end up actually going for a run. And so this is a constant process of turning things around and looking on the bright side of things. Now, that can be a positive skill for all of us to learn and to utilize, to be able to see the silver lining in all situations, but type 7s do it to a fault where it actually becomes a trap for them. To use a really simple example, imagine that you have a couch, and it's a nice couch, and you really like a couch, and then you spill something on it, and there's a big stain. And so rather than actually dealing with the problem that you have, you just flip the cushion over, and then there's no stain anymore, and everything's fine. But then a couple months later, you spill something else on the cushion, and then you go, oh, well, I'll just flip it over, and you flip it over and realize there's another stain that you didn't clean before. And so this process of constantly reframing things really catches up to 7s, because eventually they find themselves quite limited and trapped. So everything that they're doing to try to avoid these problems can actually cause more problems. The growth path for type 7, as I'm sure you've figured out by now, involves them getting more in touch with the darker sides of life. As they grow, type 7s become more aware of the ways in which they avoid pain and limitations and frustration. Type 7s have a lot of great ideas and a lot of different things that they want to pursue, but the difficulty about these things is that sticking to one path and following a project through to fruition means committing to something, and that is a form of limitation. And so many 7s will wake up one day and realize that they've had all of these failed projects and all these failed relationships because they've never actually really been able to follow things through. And that's not to say that they won't have completed some things. Type 7s often find that they've found one thing that they stick to, whether that's a relationship or learning a musical instrument or something. But for the most part, there's a lot of different things that they've just really left unfinished. Something I've heard about a lot is type 7s kind of reaching this dark point. In the sense, it's almost like they're boxed into a corner and there is no way out. I think a lot of type 7s might have experienced this during COVID and during the lockdowns, where they really felt as though there wasn't any way out. And so at this moment, they're kind of forced to confront that darkness that they've been avoiding for all of this time. And obviously that's an incredibly difficult and painful thing to go through. When type 7s are able to do some work on themselves, they start showing up more like healthy 5s, in the sense that they're less outward focused on the world and more inward focused on their own inner experience. Less so much busy work in their head, but more how they're feeling and what they're experiencing just at the present moment. As well, for type 7s, they can become a bit more discerning with regards to their social engagements and being very kind of aware of and conscious of their resources, very much like healthy 5s, and noticing where they put their resources and what they want to invest in. And this is one way for type 7s to actually focus more in on projects and see things to fruition rather than being so scattered all the time. For those of you looking to better engage with type 7s in your life, here's a couple of things that I would mention. One thing I've heard some 7s talk about is that it's really difficult when people don't take them seriously. And we can kind of see the ways in which type 7s condition other people to do this. If we look at the experience of those who are engaging with type 7s, a type 7 might have a new idea about something, and at that moment when they're sharing it, it's really exciting and you can't wait to see the result of it. But the next time you have a conversation with them, they might still have the same idea, but they've done some more research on it and thought up some new things, and now they've changed something but added this other thing, and it still sounds pretty cool and you're excited to see the result. But then after the 5th or 10th time that they're bringing this idea to you, you start to recognize that it's just an idea. This thing's actually never going to happen, and they're not actually going to put in the work that's required to do it. Now, if you're experiencing this, it can be quite frustrating and even sometimes annoying. And this lack of commitment can be bothersome for some people engaging 7s, whether that's in romantic relationships or in a work context. Maybe you've got a co-worker or someone who works for you who is a 7, and they don't actually put in the work that they're talking about in order to fulfill this thing. But thinking about it from the perspective of the type 7, we've recognized the ways in which that it's actually really difficult for type 7s to commit to things. And even though they might not be aware of it or voice it, type 7s on some level are cognizant of the fact that they do procrastinate and they do spend a lot of time ruminating on different ideas, but never actually really follow through and commit to things. And so I would just really encourage compassion in these moments. Hopefully this video has helped you to understand type 7s a bit more and really recognize the fact that committing to something for them is a form of limitation, and that's the exact kind of thing that they're trying to avoid. That brings us to the end of our introduction for type 7. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, please make sure to leave us a like, and you can also subscribe to our channel because you'll get updates on new Enneagram videos from us. If you are a type 7, I'd love to hear about your experience, so please leave a comment below. And for those of you who have something to add or a question, you're also welcome to leave a comment. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.